Chapter 16. More Balkan Tremors. In the turbulent Balkans of the early 20th century, peace treaties seemed to be no more than temporary truces during which the parties schemed at realignment for the next round of fighting. So it was in mid-June 1914, as Kaiser Wilhelm II held discussions with his friend Archduke Franz Ferdinand. These talks were followed by a far-ranging conversation between Franz Ferdinand and Count Berchtold, foreign minister of the dual monarchy. These, in turn, led to the drafting by several hands within the Habsburg Foreign Ministry of a memorandum outlining a grand strategy for Austria-Hungary. Wilhelm and Franz Ferdinand met at the Archduke's country estate, Konopsk, in Bohemia, today's Czech Republic. No transcript survives, but there is evidence that Franz Ferdinand had been asked by his emperor, Franz Joseph, to obtain from Wilhelm a commitment to continue to back Austria unconditionally, such as he had given in November 1912, and that Wilhelm had avoided providing such a statement. The Austrian government believed that Serbia posed a mortal danger, but the Kaiser disagreed. The political relationship between Wilhelm and Franz Ferdinand was far more complex than it appeared on the surface. For the Kaiser, it was, at least in part, a friendship of convenience. He had set out to form a bond with the Habsburg heir apparent. In some respects that was easy to do because of their shared tastes, including a passion for hunting. Wilhelm made a point of treating Sophie, Franz Ferdinand's wife, as an archduchess, a position denied to her in her own country. He dealt with the Archduke as though he were the political partner that, upon the death of elderly Franz Joseph, he might well become. He worked at making a friend of Franz Ferdinand, but Franz Ferdinand may not have been entirely fond of Wilhelm. There were tensions within the Austro-German alliance. Both were men of autocratic temperament. They were impatient and held strong biases. But Franz Ferdinand was Roman Catholic while Wilhelm was Lutheran. And the Archduke deeply resented the descent of the Habsburg Empire from its first place among the powers of Europe to its position in 1914 as a junior partner to Wilhelm's Germany. He detested Hungary, and deplored the weakness that drove Austria to make the Magyars a partner in government. Wilhelm, on the contrary, spoke highly of Count István Tisza, the Hungarian prime minister, but failed to convince Franz Ferdinand. Both men entertained hopes of an eventual détente with Russia, whose Tsar shared their belief in royal absolutism. But just as Wilhelm allowed his anti-Slav racism to overcome his monarchist ideology, Nicholas subordinated his ideology to his country's national interest. And it should be noted that the Kaiser had a paranoid fear that Russia was planning a war against Germany. Time and again, during the frequent war crises that were so conspicuous a feature of their time, both men chose peace, and were distrusted by the military in their respective countries for having done so. Both men were intemperate in their use of language, Franz Ferdinand in dealing with people, Wilhelm in dealing with politics. Though in theory they were closest allies, the Kaiser's Germany pursued ambitious economic plans in Asia, and even in the Balkans from which Franz Ferdinand's dual monarchy was excluded. Austria-Hungary would not back Germany in Morocco, Germany would not support Austria-Hungary in Albania. Regarding the belligerents in the Second Balkan War, Germany was for Greece and Austria was for Bulgaria. Austrians could not understand how Germany could fail to see why Serbia, which had just doubled in size, terrified them. Serbia exercised a powerful magnetic pull on the substantial Slavic population of the Habsburg Empire. In policy planning in June 1914, the question for the two empires was which country should be their main Balkan ally, Romania or Bulgaria. Germany chose Romania while Austria chose, once again, Bulgaria. But on this issue Franz Ferdinand parted company with his government. He, like the Kaiser, was for Romania. Here they were in council together, two of the most disliked men in European public life, yet, within the ranks of their own governments, perhaps the only ones of consequence who again and again favored pulling back from the brink of war. They were misunderstood by the outside world. The Kaiser, who loved to talk tough, often ranted and raved like a belligerent adolescent trying to impress his peers, but while his tirades were bellicose, his decisions, when the time to act arrived, by and large were not. There was no reason to misunderstand Franz Ferdinand, however. He spoke as well as worked to achieve peace. General Conrad, sometime Austrian chief of staff, recalled Franz Ferdinand's aide-de-camp saying in 1913, "The Archduke has sounded the retreat all along the line. He will on no account have war with Russia, he will not allow it. He wants not a plum tree, not a sheep from Serbia." Berchtold, Austria's foreign minister, said to Conrad, "The heir apparent is all on the side of peace." Reportedly Franz Ferdinand told dinner guests that Austria had nothing to gain from conquering Serbia, going to war would be a bit of nonsense. On March 16, 1914, Conrad spoke, as he so often did, of going to war as soon as possible against Russia. He was speaking to the German ambassador in Vienna, who explained why it could not happen. "Two important people are against it, your Archduke Franz Ferdinand and my Kaiser." A secret truth about the politics of 1914, something of which the outside world had no suspicion, was that if these two men continued to work together in pursuit of their common policy goals, the great powers of Europe might well have remained at peace. The wars of 1914 would not have taken place. Count Berchtold had come to Konopsk the day after Wilhelm left. It was Sunday, June 14, 2 weeks before Franz Ferdinand's scheduled trip to Sarajevo. The two men and their wives spent the day together. Afterwards Berchtold put his foreign ministry officials to work on questions that were at issue. It was not really his staff. It consisted of a clique of talented firebrands he had inherited from Ehrenthal, who had known how to control their high spirits. Now Berchtold was giving them their head. His aim was to summarize Austria's current thinking on world affairs, where the dual monarchy was and where it hoped to go. One concern was Albania, a country created by the European powers as a buffer to contain Serbian expansionism. The assumption had been that it would be Austro-German in orientation. Indeed, Albania had been provided with a German monarch. Yet Italy, nominally the ally of Austria and Germany in the Triple Alliance, was maneuvering to achieve hegemony in the newly created country. Italy was becoming a rival and perhaps an enemy. Was Russia a concern? Wilhelm and Franz Ferdinand tended to think not, and favored a thaw in relations with the Tsar. However, some in the Foreign Office in Vienna feared that, as in 1912, Pan-Slav Russians would be able to unite all the Balkan countries, only this time against Germany and Austria instead of against Turkey. Wilhelm thought that the Balkan states would remain disunited. The trick was to back the right combination of them. Romania was at the top of his list. Its monarch had secretly pledged, personally, to support the Triple Alliance. That did not bind his country. Wilhelm and Franz Ferdinand hoped for a public and secure commitment. A problem was that Austria was bound to Hungary in the dual monarchy, and Hungary and Romania had an apparently irreconcilable conflict, one that endures today. Franz Ferdinand was fiercely anti-Hungarian, and wanted to ally with Romania at Hungary's expense. The Kaiser would not face the issue. He admired Hungary's premier, Count István Tisza, and felt that the Hungary-Romania conflict could somehow be made to go away. He also wanted to bring in Greece as an ally, but lacked convincing evidence that Greece would wish to do so. Finally, he hoped to reconcile Serbia and Austria, much to the disgust of the Austrians, who tried in vain to convince him that Serbia was a menace that somehow had to be eliminated. In effect, the Kaiser was proposing to recreate the victorious alliance of the Second Balkan War, but this time have it led by Germany and the dual monarchy. He argued for going with what had been the winning side. Berchtold saw things the other way around. The dual monarchy's foreign minister did not believe that Romania would be an ally of Austria's, it would not back Austria-Hungary because of the Hungarian conflict, and the dual monarchy would therefore have to ally with Romania's enemy, Bulgaria. Bulgaria had ties with Turkey, so Greece would have to be thrown on the other side. Therefore Berchtold would essentially reconstitute the alliance pattern of the Second Balkan War too, but he would take over what had been not the winning, but the losing side. On the eve of the world crisis, there was no agreement in Berlin or Vienna as to who was the enemy or what was the quarrel in the troublesome Balkans. As regards Europe as a whole, the two empires were reasonably clear as to who was on what side. They themselves, maybe joined by Italy, on one side, Russia and France, maybe with England, on the other. Moreover, the two chiefs of the General Staff, Helmut von Moltke in Germany and Franz Conrad von Hötzendorf in Austria-Hungary, were in close touch with one another and sometimes discussed their respective war plans. Both generals often urged launching preventive war. Indeed, in the words of Hugh Strachan, Conrad first proposed preventive war against Serbia in 1906, and he did so again in 1908-09, in 1912-13, in October 1913, and May 1914, between the 1st of January 1913 and the 1st of January 1914 he proposed a Serbian war 25 times. But the generals were subordinated to monarchs who opted for peace. And in Germany, Moltke also was opposed by Tirpitz, who wanted a Cold War, at least for many years to come, rather than a hot one, and whose focus was on a conflict with England rather than with the land powers of France and Russia. Then, too, lobbying against Moltke was the Ministry of War, which wanted to keep the officer corps small enough to ensure Prussian control of Germany, which was a level too low to win a war. Even Moltke, in the circumstances of 1913, had cautioned against launching a war because it was the wrong time to do so. He continued to believe that a European war is bound to come sooner or later, in which the issue will be one of a struggle between Germandom and Slavdom. But, in his view, a war should not be initiated until public opinion could be rallied around the cause. In Moltke's words, when starting a world war one has to think very carefully. As the 20th century dawned, Europeans were richer and more powerful than anybody ever had been before. They should also have felt more secure than anybody had felt before. But they did not. They, or at least their governments, were in the grip of fear. They sensed the tremors. Where or when, they did not know, but they were convinced an earthquake was going to strike. Across the ocean, at least one American statesman was sufficiently attuned to European realities to feel the same thing. His name was Edward House. He could speak for the president, and he decided to try his hand at preventing the cataclysm that threatened.